Chapter 19. Dissenting Voices. You may have noticed the absence of Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon in the list of aggressors. Neither are the countries that make up the Arabian Peninsula, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Oman or Yemen involved in combat. Let's consider the latter list first. When the world sees the aggressors gathering on the borders of Israel, prophecy tells us that Sheba, Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish will protest as events unfold. The prophecy reads, "On that day thoughts will come into the mind of Gog, and you will devise an evil scheme. You will say, I will invade a land of unwalled villages. Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish and all her villages will say to you, have you come to plunder? Have you gathered your hoards to loot, to carry off silver and gold, to take away livestock and goods and to seize much plunder?" We will consider the plunder later. For now, you simply need to know that Sheba and Dedan are the ancient names for countries that lie in the Arabian Peninsula. As for Tarshish, there are two schools of thought. It could be either Spain or Great Britain. The weakest argument of the two is that Tarshish is Spain. Some scholars come to this conclusion based on the fact that there is a modern-day city called Tartessos, which is located in southern Spain. There is little else to support this hypothesis. There are several reasons, however, why Britain would be a more suitable candidate. First, let's consider the following two key phrases in our prophecy: merchants, and all her villages. The word, merchants, is easily comprehended. The Hebrew is shir and simply means trader, dealer or merchant. This word alone does not support Britain over Spain, as both regions throughout their history have been great maritime traders. The phrase, and all her villages, is far more revealing, when we delve into the root of the Hebrew word used, which is keper. Upon closer examination, we begin to unravel the hidden clues within. To begin with, caper actually means young lions, as translated in the KJV, the TLV and the ASV. And not all her villages is found in the NIV. A clearer picture emerges when we have an accurate understanding of the root word. Indeed, it is evident that Britain, unlike Spain, has long been symbolically associated with the lion. The term young lions can therefore be understood as Britain's offspring, particularly referring to its former colony, the United States. Again, lions are a symbol of power. Historically, there has been an extremely strong trading and military alliance between these two nations like no other. The next question we should ask is this: do these two nations have an alliance with the countries that occupy the Arabian Peninsula today? With the exception of Yemen, the answer is yes. In fact, the US and NATO have military bases in all these countries with the exclusion of Yemen. There are further indications within Scripture that point to Tarshish being Britain. We find one such reference in the book of Isaiah, which states, "Cross over to Tarshish. Wail, you inhabitants of the island." Here, we see a clear distinction between Britain and Spain, for we know that Britain is an island, whilst Spain is not. As we examine both the current geopolitical landscape and the words of Scripture, it is clear that both align with Ezekiel's prophecy, as it unfolds before our eyes. When the players in the Gog and Magog war begin their advance against Israel, the Arabian nations, excluding Yemen, together with Britain and the United States, will raise their voices in protest. Nothing more. What about Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon? Prophecy remains silent. However, the following observations are pertinent. All five of these nations lay within striking distance of Israel's nuclear arsenal. Maybe they are wise to remain silent. Although, that doesn't mean they won't play their part. If Russia along with Turkey, the Stans and Iran invade from the north, they will have to cross Lebanon and Syria without hindrance. Considering Russia and Iran have considerable influence over Lebanon and Syria, then being allowed to amass troops in these countries isn't inconceivable. But Cush and Put crossing Egypt is another matter, which we'll consider later. One last thought: Turkey, as I write this book, is a NATO member who wouldn't normally side with Russia. However, as always, God knows more than man. It is a fact that Turkey is currently sitting on the fence in relation to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It is my opinion Turkey will walk away from NATO, siding with Russia and its Muslim neighbors in the end. God's hook. We are confronted with a weighty matter of prophetic significance. As we observe the current geopolitical landscape, it is clear that the nations surrounding Israel are united in their animosity towards her. The Muslims, in particular, display a palpable hatred towards the people of God. They need no other reason to attack. Yet there is another player in this conflict, one mightier than the Muslim nations, namely Russia. The Almighty is the driving force behind their involvement, not hatred. Prophecy tells us that God will place a hook in Gog's jaw, pulling him into the affray. Do not be deceived, our God is sovereign over the affairs of men and nations, and he will use even the actions of those who oppose him to accomplish his purpose. So, what are the hooks that God will use? The first is Gog's inherent aggression. He will be a brutal man, prone to violent acts. A character flaw not difficult to imagine in a modern Russian leader. The second is Gog's desire for power. Power that drives him to align with other nations that also oppose free will and democracy. The primary hook, however, is financial. The prophecy which relates to this says, "I will attack a peaceful and unsuspecting people, all of them living without walls and without gates and bars. I will plunder and loot, and turn my hand against the resettled ruins and the people gathered from the nations, rich in livestock and goods, living at the center of the land. Sheba and Dedan, and the merchants of Tarshish and all her villages will say to you, have you come to plunder? Have you gathered your hoards to loot, to carry off silver and gold, to take away livestock and goods and to seize much plunder?" In this prophecy, we are confronted with two significant words that demand our attention. Words that hold the key to understanding Russia's reason for invasion: loot and plunder. You may scratch your head at this moment, asking, does Russia really need to strip Israel of its assets, and if so, what can this tiny nation possibly possess that Russia so desperately desires? The answer will surprise you: natural gas. In order to comprehend what's going to happen, we need to understand recent events following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, in 2022. An invasion that clearly shows Putin's aggressive nature. One consistent with Gog. It was also an invasion that had unforeseen consequences, not only for Ukraine but for the West, and indirectly Israel. On the 22nd of February 2022, America, Britain, and the European Union, EU, imposed restrictions on Russia that froze their assets in the West, including the sale of debts by severely sanctioning Russian banks. As a consequence, Russia imposed its own restrictions on the West where it hurt the most, cutting its supply of natural gas into Europe by 75% for 10 days in July, and then again in August that year along the Nord Stream pipeline, NS1 and NS2. By September of 2022 the situation had grown worse. 4 separate explosions were recorded in both the NS1 and NS2 pipelines in the Baltic Sea, near the Isle of Bornholm. Both sides accused the other of sabotage. Regardless of who did what, both sides were to suffer. Europe imports 83% of its natural gas from abroad, its main supplier being Russia. As for Russia, it sells a staggering 60% of all its gas to Europe, which accounts for 36% of its gross domestic product. Long term, Russia desperately needs to sell gas to Europe. But Europe has decided not to buy, opting to invest in renewable energy, nuclear and more importantly, imports of gas from other nations rather than Russia by 2030. Sooner if it can be achieved. And herein lies the problem. No one other than Russia is capable of supplying the quantity of gas needed. But God's timing is impeccable. Israel, against all odds, steps into the narrative. Let's embark on a journey through time and witness God's providence at work in the energy landscape. Israel's quest for oil and gas can be traced back to 1952, when exploration companies with Israeli backing started searching for offshore resources. In 1955, a breakthrough occurred when they discovered oil. Over the next 4 decades, numerous exploration wells were drilled on both land and sea, but aside from a small oil field, no significant commercial success was achieved. However, in the 1970s, the The discovery of oil in non-commercial quantities set the stage for a remarkable turn of events. By June 1999, the Tethys Sea Partnership struck proverbial gold, with the discovery of a natural gas field 40 kilometers off the coast of Ashkelon, called Ch19. This was a pivotal moment. Israel had discovered their first commercially viable gas field. The following year in 2000, another significant gas reservoir, known as Mary B, containing 45 billion cubic meters, BCM of gas was discovered. Commercial production from Mary B commenced in 2004, predominantly utilized by the Israeli Electric Company, as a substitute for diesel and coal. The success of Ch19 and Mary B fields sparked an exploration boom within Israel. The Ministry of Energy awarded several exploration licenses, resulting in a partnership led by Noble Energy. A further discovery was announced in 2009 when they unveiled the Tamar field, located 90 kilometers west of Haifa. Alongside a smaller field discovered in the same year, this partnership found a further 250 BCM of recoverable gas reserves. 1 year later, Noble Energy and its partners revealed the colossal Leviathan reserves, situated 30 kilometers west of Tamar. This massive find boasted an estimated 500 BCM of recoverable gas, making it the largest natural gas discovery worldwide that decade. Subsequently, additional gas reserves were unearthed in fields such as Karish, Ch19, Dolphin, Tamar Southwest, and Aphrodite Ashai. These discoveries, totaling around 900 BCM of recoverable gas, have brought about a revolution in Israel's energy sector, with the Tamar, Leviathan, and Karish fields commencing production in 2013, 2020, and 2022 respectively. It is amazing to think that against all odds, Israel as of 2022 is able to supply Europe's thirst for gas, just in the nick of time. As Europe turns towards God's people with a smile on its face, Russia looks on in envy. It stands to lose more than a third of its annual income. A blow it will not take lightly. If you doubt Russia is looking for an opportunity to loot Israel, then think again.